This is an ongoing series of town halls. I want to welcome you. It's a little after 6. From a timekeeping perspective, we hope to be out by 7:30. We really, I think, have a wonderful group to speak to the BCHO faculty this evening. I want to start off with 2 announcements. First, I just want to publicly welcome back Dr. Bert Lubin. It is great to physically see him in our presence and to feel his strength. Truly an honor to work with him each and every day. And I also want to publicly, and I think other guests will acknowledge and congratulate her. I just want to be one of the first to publicly congratulate Kelly Mead at being the new interim associate dean from the School of Medicine here at BCHO. Kelly tried to sit at the back of the audience and no, with the title, you're going to sit in front from now on. So welcome, Kelly. It's really an honor to welcome you to the leadership team. We are here at the Dean's Forum, and obviously Dean Talmadge King will have a lot to talk about with the School of Medicine. We are also honored to be joined by Dr. Josh Adler, who will talk more into the trenches of the school and the faculty model. But first, I wanted, as always, to recognize, acknowledge, and thank our Chancellor, Sam Hawgood, for his presence on this campus, for his leadership, and for being with us here tonight. So without further ado, I'll have Sam kick off the night.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to be brief tonight because Talmadge and Josh have a lot of, I think, very good information to exchange. This is the 3rd town hall now, including the one that we had at Corey, focused on research 2 weeks ago. And I would just like to say I really appreciate the very frank, honest, and respectful dialogue that I've enjoyed at each of the town halls. And each week I've been over here meeting with either individuals or groups of physicians. And likewise, I have really appreciated the honest, frank dialogue that we have had. It's been very, very helpful for me to understand the issues that we need to collectively and jointly grapple with, and it's actually been very energizing for me, so I thank you. Tonight, we are going to shift gears a little bit and hopefully begin a dialogue around some of the mechanics of the School of Medicine and what it means to be a faculty member at UCSF. I've lived that role for now 36 years, so it sort of feels natural to me. But as I think about it, it's a complex organization. We live in a larger parent, the University of California. We have multiple missions that we deal with, clinical care, research, education, and public service. And we have evolved how we do that, living under rules that are system-wide, under rules and policies and practices that are local, meaning at our own campus. And it's complex, particularly for someone who is looking at it from the outside. So without further ado, I'm going to just welcome Talmadge here to the podium, who's going to walk through a set of information. Josh will follow with some information about what we call funds flow, sort of 101 on how some of the money moves around at UCSF, and then we hope to leave plenty of time for questions and dialogue. So thanks for being here tonight.
So thank you, Sam. So I've been dean now 3 years, 1 month, 26 days. Since I started, I have been trying to increase the understanding of our faculty and staff about how the school runs. So I've been having a series of Dean's Forums at various locations of UCSF. I think this will be now like the 9th Dean's Forum that I've had. They will continue into the coming year, and they've been on various topics from finances, education, research, our clinical enterprise, and discussions about our advocacy, our mission, our community work. So I've been trying to provide information to our faculty and staff about how we work. And so I'm really pleased to be here to talk about the School of Medicine. Because all of us actually find this quite difficult to grasp, and as Sam says, we're a complex organization. So we're part of the University of California, and our president of the university is Janet Napolitano, whose office is not very far from here. And the people who control the University of California are the regents of University of California, and they're appointed by the governor, and they have terms of 12 years each. So they have long periods of time that they spend in this role guiding the university. There are 10 universities, and we are one of them. We are very unique because we don't have a football team, we don't have an undergraduate college. We are basically a graduate university that is all related to health sciences. Within that ecosystem, there's another ecosystem, that's UCSF, UC Health, University of California Health, and it includes the universities that have academic health centers, of which we are one. There are 6 of them. The newest is UC Riverside. There are actually 18 professional schools in our system, including dentistry, nursing, optometry, pharmacy, public health, and veterinary medicine. And there are 6 academic centers, 12 hospitals, 3,600 beds. We're the 4th largest healthcare delivery system in California. Within that, there's UCSF Health. And UCSF Health is basically, this is what, when we say UCSF Health, this is what we are composed of, including the UCSF Benioff Children's Hospitals in Oakland and San Francisco. The School of Medicine is slightly different than UCSF Health in that the School of Medicine has other key affiliations, Zuckerberg San Francisco General, the VA health system, and the Community Regional Medical Center in Fresno. Those are parts of our educational research mission that are part of the School of Medicine, and they're not directly part of UCSF Health. There are relationships there, but they're not part of UCSF Health. What is my job? My job is to support the people who are here, who work within the School of Medicine. And in doing that, we try to advance the academic mission. We have to raise funds. We have to manage the finances. We have to recruit and retain talent. We have to optimize the use of space. So these are the pillars of what I see as my role in the university. And without question, probably the biggest thing is supporting the people who work for the university. We thought that there were actually 2 important things that you all would like to hear about, and we're going to focus on those now, and they relate to faculty and how faculty are appointed, and then how funds flow. There's a lot more to talk about when we talk about the university, but we thought those topics might be of particular interest given where we're going. So this is a summary of that topic at a very high level. So there are 5 academic series in the University of California system. And at UCSF, their ladder rank is the tenure track within the UC system. In residence is a research track. Clinical X is the clinical educator track, clinical scientist track. Health sciences clinical is mainly the clinical educator track. And then there are adjunct faculty who have largely research roles within the school. There are about 2,300 paid faculty members within the School of Medicine, of which about 800 of them are well, more than that, about 1,200 have major clinical roles as opposed to having research roles within the School of Medicine. I'll also point out there's academic series and non-academic series. It turns out if you go across the UC system, University of California system, this series is the Committee on Academic Personnel, CAP, controls the promotions within the academic series, and the non-academic series at other universities, they're not part of academic senate. So the colleges, this is a big issue for colleges, not so much for us, but we decided at UCSF that everybody's under the tent. So at UCSF, everybody's under CAP and are participants at academic senate, although that is not entirely true at other at other UCs. But this is how it works. So each faculty member is appointed within a series with a rank and a step. So the ranks are assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, and the steps go from step 1 to step 6 in assistant, 1 to 5 in associate, 1 to 9 in professor, and then something called above scale. So when you often hear people say, I'm professor of clinical surgery, step 1, which means that they're at the first step in the professor series. And it has meaning that you'll see in a few minutes that relate to how salaries are paid. And the expectations of faculty depend on their academic series. So most Benioff Children's Hospital physicians will be in the health sciences clinical series. And if you read the academic promotions manual, it says that health sciences clinical professor series engage in scholarly or creative activities which derive from and support their primary responsibilities in clinical teaching, professional, and service activities. The definition of creative and scholarly activities in this series is very broad, and we'll talk a little bit about that if there are specific questions. But that is the series we expect most people to be in. At the assistant level, merit increases occur every 2 years. Those is a step. You go from step 1 to step 2 every 2 years. Most people are promoted in year 6 or 7 of their tenure on the faculty. It can go further longer than that, but that's pretty unusual. Usually if you go past step, if you basically go past, step 4 or 5, there's something going on, and it takes some special consideration, because most people get promoted to associate professor after about year 6 or 7. Associate professor, the merits increase again every 2 years, and you're promoted after 6 years or 2 years at step 3. And I would say in general that happens for the overwhelming majority of people on the faculty. And then once you're promoted to professor, the merit increase, the step increase occurs every 3 years. And then from then on, it's every 3 years after you're up at the professor rank. If the Committee on Academic Personnel reviews all advancements, they first review you when you go from assistant to associate, and then from associate to professor. And then one of the unique things about the University of California system, and other institutions are always surprised by this, is there's another major promotion that occurs when you go from step 5 to step 6. It actually looks like you're being promoted again, because you have to go through all of the same criteria and a review that you did to go from associate to full professor. And then there's another promotion when you go from professor step 9 to above scale, and that's another big promotion step within our system. If you add up the years to get there, you're about at year 25 or 30 on the faculty, either here or somewhere else. Consecutive accelerations get reviewed by academic personnel, or if you're being accelerated more than 1 year, if you get 2 years or more that your promotion is being accelerated, then the Committee on Academic Personnel reviews all of those advancements. So those are the nuances within the system. So what are the criteria for advancement? Teaching and mentoring is a major criteria. Research or creative activities, professional competence, and university of public service are the main criteria that are reviewed by the promotions committee. There's different weighting of each of these depending on what series you are. So for example, if you're an in-residence faculty member, the weight is almost entirely on research. You have to do peer-reviewed, largely research, and you have to get extramural grant support in that series. In the Clinical X series, the rating is largely on teaching and mentoring, but you have to have some creative activities. And then the Health Science series is largely on professional competence, with teaching being a second major criteria. And so the advancement process proceeds by the faculty member pushing their packet forward. So when the time comes, you'll get a notice that says your time is here and you should go forward. If you do not put forward the information for the packet, nothing will happen. It'll just sit there. And if you miss the deadline, it'll sit there till the next cycle. So a lot of faculty members have difficulty with that. That you have responsibility for putting your packet forward. And then there's a big black box where you hear about it when you put it in, and you hear about it when it comes out, but in between you hear nothing. And so the process, I always say, is like a normal pregnancy. It takes up to 9 months for it to happen, and it happens in the dark. So here's what's going on in the dark. So in the dark, what's happening is the department has a promotions committee that reviews the packet and makes a decision, transmits that decision to the department chair. The department chair transmits it to the dean's office. The dean's office gives it to the vice provost for academic affairs. That is reviewed in that office, is then sent to the committee on academic promotions. They decide if they agree or disagree. They send it back to the provost. The provost sends it to the faculty. And all of this happens confidentially in the background. Nobody knows. You can call the dean as much as you want, tell faculty as you want. I have no clue. I am not involved in it. I cannot influence this process. So it goes on in the background, and it has a life of its own. It works. It's been working for 100 years, but it is somewhat opaque. There's a whole list of things that are provided to each faculty member to understand how to best put forward a packet. There's a lot of help with building the dossier that helps put the person's position in the best light possible. And there are people to help in the dean's office with that process, but it really begins and ends with the faculty member themselves participating in it. And all of this stuff is online at the website, Academic Affairs at UCSF.edu. So that's Cliff Notes version of how the academic promotion process, appointment and promotion process occurs. So let me stop for just 1 second and answer any questions.
So that scaling looks like it was people that were at UCSF for a number of years. So say now you're trying to recruit people into your faculty group, but you've been working at another institution for 10 years. Where would you slide?
It would depend. Yeah. So
How does my time at Cho transition to the appointment that I would receive at UCSF if I turn the faculty position out?
Yeah. So it starts largely with where your training, the date of that your training started, and you started working as a professional in your field. So let's say you did residency and you stopped in 2006, and you have now been in, I should have used the number I can divide, 2008, and it's now 2018. So you've been 10 years in practice. So if you were promoted every 2 years, and you were doing really well, so if you had been in the system, you would have been promoted by 10 years to associate professor step 1. So that'll be where you would be assessed for whether that's an appropriate place for you to go. But that's how it would be looked at. CAP would decide, though, that whether you qualified for it based on what you were doing wherever you were. So there's a little bit more to it than just the years since you left. But they look at that.
And so now, say I'm denied the associate professor position. would I get feedback on what I need to do to change to move to the associate professor position?
Yeah, you'll know why they did it. No, a lot of it is most of the time. So most of the time, when you come from another university, for example, it's fairly easy to just make the transition across. But and so I would expect that this is not going to be a big deal. No. Yeah, there was a question behind.
No, I was just gonna, how often are people either surprised or disappointed by the outcome?
You shouldn't.
Is there guidance along the way?
Yeah, you should not be surprised. You should not be surprised.
Okay.
Disappointed? I would say it's rare. It's interesting. People talk about, so when I was chair of medicine for 10 years, and I was at San Francisco General for 10 years, and people talk about the fact that you can't get promoted. And in my whole time there, that very rarely happened. And when it happened, if I were to show you why, because remember, these are your peers. This is not some mysterious group. They're mysterious in the sense that they're confidential, but they're your peers. They're people like you. So people like you sat in a room and said, "This you have not done enough to get promoted. These are the peers that are making this decision." And usually when that happens, there is an absolute ironclad reason for why you don't get promoted, and I would say it's really rare. And probably the biggest thing that we see is when people are in the wrong series. That's the biggest problem. So you're in the in-residence series, which requires that you do research as the primary criteria. That is what you're going to be judged on. So how do you judge research? Publications, extramural grant support. That's what a researcher is asked to be doing. If you haven't done those things, then your promotion in that series is limited. Even if you were a very good doctor and you did outstanding clinical work, you're in the wrong series. So usually the discussion is you're in the wrong series for what you're doing day to day. You need to be in HS clinical series or the clinical X series, and that's where the problem is, that you're mismatched by series. Colleen?
I'm just wondering if you could speak to sort of what the conversation has been with the academic senate regarding CHO and our leadership over here. Does the academic senate view all of the leadership work that we're doing over here as equal to that of what would potentially be happening at the institutions in San Francisco? So if I serve on the medical executive committee and I'm on 5 other CHO committees and I'm a leader of a division over here, that's what all these people in this room are. Is that equal to the same thing on the San Francisco side? So I just, can you speak to that?
I think the answer should be yes, but my concern, no, the reason why, let me tell you why I'm pausing. You've actually named a part of the job in an academic medical school that's a struggle for us to quantify and equate. So participation on the medical executive committee is something that you will be given credit for, but not academic credit for, right? So people will look, and that's actually your community service. Okay, right? So
everything over here,
yeah,
that counts as
yeah.
community service.
Yeah, and I would tell you the biggest problem we have is not that it's not counted, it's not reported. So people don't tell us that they were on, the MEC for 4 years, right? So that's usually the biggest problem. So, and that's why filling out your CV and doing that is really important to do. But it should be given the same, even if you worked at Kaiser,
Yeah.
you would be given credit for that part.
I think that might have been an issue for me some years ago, so I just wanted to make sure that has been something that as we're adding more and more faculty into the mix, because I don't think many people over here sit on the academic senate in terms of in the CAP. And so I think that would be something that it would be great if we could just check as we are adding more people from here, that the work and the contributions that people are making to Oakland Children's are regarded as service to UCSF, the community, whether it be on the academic side from a research perspective or in the leadership and community service role. So I think that would just be something that would be really great to look into, and I think it would be really lovely for everybody to have that reassurance that that's happening.
Yeah, and so let me answer one thing. Anybody who's on the faculty who want to be on CAP, just volunteer and you will be on CAP. So that is not one of the things that people are battering to do on, and it's really hard. So if you trust me, let me know. And
Could I just chime in? So
We are recording, so people can use a mic though.
So obviously, a lot of what we're talking about will hopefully be solved by our Associate Dean's office in communication with the Dean's office. And one of the things that the Clinical Affairs Committee of the Academic Senate has offered already is some help with faculty development on site here. So hopefully that will be one of the first or second or third things that we get done over here.
so
My question was, or I was looking at this advancement review process, and it seems like there's 2 committee stops. And my question was, is that committee confidential? Do we know the members of those committees? And then 2, do people who integrate and become faculty get a chance to serve? And you said they would serve on the CAP, but I see this Department of Promotions Committee. Like, how do people get on that committee?
Volunteer.
Or they volunteer?
almost. I mean, I don't know how you did it in the P's,
Yeah, so-
but in medicine, medicine we in the Department of Medicine is large, so we actually had multiple subcommittees. So each series had a committee that reviewed people in that series, and then that went forward to the Executive Promotions Committee, which had about 10 people on it, 12 people on it, that were representative of each series. So, because we didn't want people on it who didn't understand health science series or whatever. So health science series subcommittee reviewed health science series faculty, put them forward, and then there's an executive committee that then really is the final committee that makes the decision. And it's appointed by the department chair, but mostly volunteer. I don't know if he's.
Yeah,
Because I was on the Department of PHS Clinical Promotions Committee for a number of years, and I just wanted to reaffirm what you said, which is that, first of all, that creative and scholarly contributions we did look at them in that series quite broadly. Second of all, we did have faculty members that were working primarily at other institutions, and contributions at those institutions were weighted quite similarly to contributions at the main campus. And third, just reaffirming what you said, most people were promoted on time or advanced, got their merit increase or merit advancements on time. It was usually exactly as you said, really in the wrong series or something that we can't speak about, but if you saw it, you would know why they weren't being advanced.
Sam, did you want to?
No, I would just say two things. The multiple series are unique to the health system within the UC system, so you wouldn't see these multiple series at, say, Berkeley, where there's not a health system. And it's the reason there are multiple series, and they've been added gradually over the last 100 years, is recognition that the responsibilities of faculty on a clinical campus like UCSF vary widely over a much broader spectrum than, say, a faculty on a predominantly research and teaching campus like Berkeley. And the important thing about that is that the 5 series are a horizontal. What I used to try to tell faculty is that it's a horizontal system, not a vertical system, meaning there's not a hierarchy of a better series and a less valuable series. They're equally valued, and the key, as Talmage said and Steve just said, is putting a round peg in a round hole, aligning what you love to do every day, what your passion is, with the right series, so that you're evaluated on what you like to do and what you think you're doing. And then the other comment I would make is, as Talmage said, it is your responsibility to provide the information to the committee. But you're given a tremendous amount of help to do that. It's not suddenly, go fill out your dossier and give it to us, and gee, you've missed the fact that you're on 5 committees. People will help you, and it'll be, the predominant role of the associate dean to make sure, in conjunction with the chair and other faculty mentors, that you've got mentors that are guiding not just how you fill out a form, but how you construct your career so that you are doing things that will guide you through the system. So I know when you first hear it, it feels like, wow, this is on me, and it's a very judgmental system. The way it works is you get a lot of help, and in general, it's a system designed to give you credit for what you're actually doing and recognize and celebrate what you do every day. And the key is to make sure that the series you're in best describes what you actually do every day and what you love to do every day. And then this sort of just happens. It's a good thing, and it's a celebratory thing. The reason you don't want to just say, well, I don't really care what my title on my card is, there is a linkage to where you are in rank and step to the University of California's defined pension plan. So it has a fairly large impact on your eventual retirement benefits, which, as you'll see in a minute, are perhaps the richest retirement benefits of any university. For that matter, we're getting close to any corporation in the country, which is why I spend a lot of time with the regents figuring out how to keep the pension plan alive. But it does matter. So it's not something you want to just ignore and say, I don't care what they call me. It does have implications predominantly around retirement.
So there are 3 associate deans who deal with academic affairs, and they're there to help. This is what they're being supported to do. Yeah.
So one of the things that occurs to me is that here I have a division chief that advocates for me. And I know that person, and they brought me in and hired me and have been looking out for my career. As we merge, presumably there's going to be a division chief on the other side of the day that didn't hire me, that is merging me as a clinician into their group. How do I know that that person is interested in having me there? It's not just 2 sides are trying to fit together. And how do I know that that person is then going to be advocating for my career and the sort of product that I want to support?
Well, I think the only way you'll know is for you and that person to communicate with each other and work with each other. I don't think there's any other way. Right?
I would just add comment, though, that we're still working on the overall governance piece, but it is the division chiefs are evaluated by their chair as to to how they treat all of the people that they are responsible for, and if there's clear lack of performance in that or unequal performance in that, then that would be an issue that the chair would need to deal with. And if the chair doesn't deal with it, then the dean holds the chair accountable for that. It's a critical issue, obviously, and it's just part of the accountability of leadership that it's not just an expectation, but it is a responsibility for which your job is at risk if you don't do it fair and equitably.
Yeah, the one way that I've seen happen is the division chief or whatever just doesn't put you forward. So someone in my office is actually watching that and saying, "Wait a minute," they would have to absolutely explain it. And so, because then once you get forward, it's out of their hands. It's in the hands of your peers. So we are watching that.
But the chair competes, for instance, both. They have limited understanding in a really conceptual way of the fabric and priorities of what the faculty bureau. And that's why, while the intentions are well-meaning, it would be very synergistic along the mission of the UC system to have a vice chair here who actually understands and understands from the, a vice chair who understands what's going on and the fabric of the academic and clinical work within the context of the obstacles in the institution. as well as what's important to the regional community and research. So there's very limited amount of time for the chairs to actually invest in this institution, given their responsibilities that are increasing. So I just use this not as not against what you said, but just advocating that a vice chair, at least particularly something as large as pediatrics, could play an important supportive role in reaching the two communities.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll move to the faculty salaries. So health sciences compensation plan. So you hear a lot about the comp plan. Every department has a comp plan, and every department's comp plan is slightly different than the other departments. The guts of it is absolutely identical, but then there are nuances based on specialty needs and issues within the department. So every department has a comp plan. It's mandated by the Office of the President that for all health sciences campuses, it outlines the department's expectations of and commitment to the faculty. There are 4 key areas. As to be a part of the comp plan, the faculty member, the person has to be appointed at greater than 50% effort. It also explains and determines the compensation, the department's salary scale. There are several different salary scales in the University of California system, and the departments within the School of Medicine. I think as a medical center, we have 4 different salary scales that are in use within the School of Medicine, and in some departments they have more than one. We can talk the specifics about that. There's incentive plans, and it describes the incentive plan, and it describes what the faculty members can do with outside activities, how that should work, and what the rules are. It talks about the benefits, including leaves of absence, and it describes the appeal process if there's an issue that arises with implementing the plan, or if someone is deemed to have loss of good standing within the department, good standing is defined within each department's comp plan. So that's sort of the fundamental background. Faculty salaries are negotiated between the department and the individual faculty member, and there are 3 components to a faculty salary in the UC system: the X, which is the base salary; the Y, which is additional negotiated compensation; and Z, which is the incentive or bonus plan for that faculty. X. So the base salary is the minimum salary rate. It's defined by the individual's rank and step, and it's not defined by series. It's defined by rank and step. It's within the defined comp plan of that department, and it's this part of your salary that's covered compensation under the University of California retirement plan, which I'll come back to in a second. Y is additional compensation. It's not covered compensation under the UC plan. It's negotiated with the chair. It's based on factors such as quality, scope, and volume of teaching, research, clinical, or administrative activities. So there's a negotiation that goes on that defines what the Y is for an individual faculty. If you're at Berkeley, you basically have only X. I guess you can have Y in some departments, but it's largely X. And the health sciences institutions have Y, and often Y is larger than X in some instances. And then Z is incentive or bonus. There are multiple kinds of Z. It's not covered compensation under the retirement plan. Eligibility and calculations are determined by each department's compensation plan. So Z is there are lots of rules around it, and the comp plan defines what the incentive plan is for each department. So here's an example. So Dr. Smith was hired as an HS clinical professor, step 1 in the Department of Pediatrics, and is a specialist. The clinical faculty in the Department of Pediatrics are on scale 4, And if you wanted to look up faculty scales, you do UC salary scales, and you can go in and you can see what all the scales are, and this is there at scale 4. Dr. Smith's base salary is $149,000, so this is the X. Dr. Smith receives an additional $10,000 per year for serving as the residency director. So this is how the salary would be calculated. So Dr. Smith gets $149,000 as base salary on scale 4 for HS Clinical, Professor Step 1, and this amount is under the pension plan, and has been as a negotiated additional salary of $101,000. That's the Y, and it's not covered by the retirement, the pension plan. So the total negotiated salary is $250,000, and there's an incentive plan or Z bonus paid for being the residency director. So the total compensation is $260,000. So that's basically how the salary would be negotiated. And almost everybody looks sort of the same, but that's basically. And every people who are who are identical as specialists, this salary this amount would be close, or if not identical, to for each person. But it would vary. So one of the things that happens is you can go to a website and look up what we're a public institution. You can look up what salaries are, and people often see differences, and they see this number and think that they are being paid differently than other people because their number might be here because they don't have the incentive piece because of their other responsibility. So it's usually, when people come to me and complain, I can usually easily address why the difference may exist. But people should be comparably the same if they do the same work. And we've been paying very, very close attention to that because we worry about salary inequities. So we've been paying attention to underrepresented minorities and women and trying to make sure that we have not inadvertently or vertently, I guess, is that a word, made discrepancies in salaries. We've been doing it now for 3 years. And I think we're doing a very good job to make sure people are being paid equitably for the work that they're doing in the school. So the sources of funding, there are a gazillion different ways people get paid. The majority of HS clinical faculty funding comes from clinical income, which is usually based on productivity defined by work RVUs. Sponsored contracts and grant funding is another source. Philanthropy, primarily through endowed chair funding, if you're lucky enough to have one of those. State FTEs, and as you saw from our earlier slide, state FTEs are, we have very few. In fact, we're reaching the point where we have more endowed chairs than we have state FTEs. And then there are salaries paid for certain kinds of jobs, like high intensity teaching. So if you're a teacher or leader, have a leadership role that requires you to be removed from RVU production of greater than 10% of time over a year, then there's another source of support for that time. But there are multiple ways that people end up paying their salary. So if you look at it, 9% of our faculty have a state FTE, which generally provides about 30% of salary support for those faculty members. Endowments, 12% of our faculty have endowed chairs or distinguished professorships. So that's another source, one of the sources of support. 29% of our faculty generate more than half of their salaries, 50% or more, through sponsored research activities. And 46% of our faculty are clinically focused, and that is, they have 75% or more of their effort in patient care activities, and that's how their salary is generated. Just to give you a flavor of how salaries are generated by the 2,300 faculty who are in the school. Retirement and covered compensation. So covered compensation is used for retirement calculations, benefit calculations, UC health insurance, and UC disability insurance. So that's X. That's covered compensation is used to determine what the institution puts in for how the university supports this portion of your benefit. UC offers a defined benefit program or defined contribution program. You can choose. Almost everybody chooses the defined benefit program. Our pair institutions only offer defined contribution programs. And there are multiple ways to sort of figure out what's valuable or not. This is a little bit of a complicated slide, but we had a company come in and help tell us what's the benefit of our pension plan. And they looked across a large number of institutions, and they came up with the average benefit is set at 100, and we compared pair institutions to that average benefit. And for example, here Stanford is 93% of the average benefit across academic institutions. And UCSF is 148% of the average benefit. So if you look at the value of this pension plan compared to other institutions, the plan is more beneficial, is viewed to be more beneficial for our employees. A little bit complicated slide, but the idea was to try to figure out how our plan relates to the community plan. And so I'll stop there and entertain any questions that relate. Okay.
How long do you have to be, many of us have been here a long time, and you're talking about benefits of a retirement plan, how long do you have to be a faculty to get the full benefits that are showing on display?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. You are vested in the plan after 5 years. And then length of service is an important determinant of the maximum benefit that you can derive. So the two things that derive what your actual take-home pay is when you're retired, where you are in that rank and step, how far you've progressed up, and then years of service. And the absolute maximum would be if you retired as a professor, step 9, or for the few that go above scale, and you had 40 years of service. So I realize that in many cases, as you transfer from another retirement plan into the university's retirement plan, the younger you are and the longer you stay, the more powerful the retirement benefits are. You obviously retain whatever you've accumulated in whatever retirement plan you're in now, you would retain that, and the UC contribution would be on top of it. If you only are in faculty for 6 years, then it's not as beneficial, obviously, as if you're in faculty for 40 years. But that's true of all pension plans for the most part. The return is completely linked, whether it's a defined contribution plan or a defined benefit plan, for the amount of time you've been paying into it. All faculty are on a defined benefit plan, and you can choose to augment that with a defined contribution plan if you choose to, and the university up to a certain max will match your contribution into the defined contribution plan. So the defined benefit plan is what all faculty get, and we certainly encourage in terms of mentoring you and giving you not only career guidance and professional guidance, but financial guidance, that if you can, based on just where you are and house payments and kids' education, et cetera, that you put the maximum extra into a defined contribution plan so that, when you do get to the joyful day of retirement, your benefits are preserved. You'll read a lot about the university's pension status. It's a huge plan for the university writ large. There's about $100 billion in the pension plan of the university to pay out the payment, just because the number of people that are paid into it over years is large. And we went through a period of time in the early 2000s where it was underfunded. That didn't mean that you didn't get what you were guaranteed, but it just meant there was some stress on the plan. And there's been a lot of work to bring it up. And we're projecting that it'll be effectively fully funded in the next few years. So it's a pretty stable situation compared to, say, the state pension plan, which is really underwater. But we own and invest our own pension plan. We're not linked to the state's pension plan. So if you read about the state of California's pension plan as being in trouble, don't interpret that means the university's plan is in trouble. We own that $100 billion corpus and invest it ourselves. Each of the 10 universities does not. That is done at a system level with a very talented team of investors.
So, Josh, we'll now talk about the fund flow.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Talmadge. I know we have a 7:30 exit time, so I will be relatively brief, but I think we'll cover the high points and then make sure that we have time for questions. I think that'll be the most important part of this. So as Talmadge spent a fair amount of time talking about faculty compensation. Faculty compensation is determined at the department level. What I'm describing in the funds flow program is the way funds flow for clinical work from the health system, UCSF Health, to the department. So clinical support for faculty salaries or faculty compensation for clinical work going from the health system to the department. The actual salary is determined at the department level. Okay, this is somewhat new for us. The plan we have now, we implemented in 2014 as part of a sort of a major organizational change to improve the performance of our overall physician practices, to reduce the total cost burden on departments for the management of our practices and the rising cost of managing a practice. So again, funds flow, it describes funds flow to the clinical departments, not individual faculty. It essentially redesigned the relationship between UCSF Health and the departments. In essence, all of the professional fee revenue and all of the technical revenue for UCSF Health, so inpatient, outpatient, all of it comes into one pot at UCSF Health. The health system, UCSF Health, holds financial responsibility for virtually all of the costs, the infrastructure, the people that are required to deliver patient care. So all of the typical costs you would see in the hospital, equipment, depreciation, all the staff, all the rent, all the utilities, it's all held by and responsible by UCSF Health. And then UCSF Health uses this combination of professional and technical income to pay the departments for the clinical care effort of faculty. So there are four big pieces. There really are two big pieces and two small pieces, and we call them tiers. And I'll just briefly explain how they work. So the first tier, tier one, is in essence a payment per work RVU. I know for those of you, it's probably not unfamiliar for some of you. Essentially, it's a payment based on the number of clinical work RVUs generated by faculty in the department. The dollars per work RVU are determined, are specialty specific. In fact, they're subspecialty specific, and they're based on the Medical Group Management Annual Survey. There are a number of these kinds of documents that try to come up with a national average by specialty for work RVUs and annual compensation, and then you divide one by the other and you get a dollar per work RVU. This is the one we use in large part because it has the largest number of specialties available. So it covers the vast majority of all of the specialties we have. The actual payment per work RVU is updated each year based on the change in the survey, plus there's a small inflation adjustment that goes in each year. And instead of using a single year, we actually use a 3-year rolling average, because any of these surveys show a degree of variation that's probably not actually justified in the real marketplace. So we average 3 years in a row, and that gives us a little bit more of a stable platform. So the basic calculation is total number of RVUs by each member of a department divided or times the dollar per work RVU, and that payment goes to the department. Question?
As we model what our financial contribution would be to our associated department over on the other side of the bay, is there any kind of coefficient applied to the MGMA benchmark, or is it just a straight MGMA benchmark, just straight up? So when when the department gets a tier 1 payment and say it's $52 per RVU is the benchmark for the preceding year, is it straight $52, or are you planning sort of a coefficient just indexed out that?
No, it would be $52. It's the now. Granted, it probably is. If you look at the number in the survey, it oftentimes won't be exactly that number from the last year, because again, we average 3 years to get the number, and then we gross up the number from the prior years because inflation has occurred in the interim, and so it's a little bit. It's oftentimes a different number than that number in the last survey, but there isn't another coefficient used.
Is there any compensation for like standard in the community?
So that is a really good question, and the challenge we've all had is, what is the community, and how do we come up with a way that was somewhat fair and equitable, or the most fair and equitable, for a huge variety of different kinds of physicians doing clinical work? And if we had something that was as broad and accurate and annually updated within the local community as the MGMA survey, we would use it. But as far as tools available, this is the one we have found to be the best to give us a guideline for what the community is. That doesn't mean that if you were to call an individual person who maybe works at a Sutter facility, that particular physician's compensation might be different. It probably would be a different number. But we don't have, that's not a reliable and consistent source of information for us to base a decision on payment to departments across a whole variety of departments and a whole variety of specialties.
Josh, could I just add, obviously MGMA gives you average, and it gives you centiles around the average. And so the discussion that we have at the overall health system, of which the faculty have a major voice in the finance committee and then the various decision making, is, are we average across the nation, or are we working in a particularly more tough marketplace, and should we be above average? And that's a discussion that is robust every year, as you can imagine. And the outcome of that discussion is driven by many things, but predominantly by the financial health of the health system, because at the end of the day, you have to have the dollars to pay the money. So it's a robust discussion. Faculty have a voice in that discussion. At the end of the day, it's a combination of what we think we need to pay in order to be competitive in the market, and what we can afford to pay. And those are the variables that go into that decision.
So there are 6 medical centers and UC Riverside.
Yeah, so each medical center has its own unique way of dealing with this. We believe we have the best, but this is not a system level thing.
This is a UCSF.
This is a UCSF model, and
right.
each one has their own differences.
Right. And as this general modality for academic health systems is becoming more common. So a number of academic health systems have adopted something very similar to that. And in fact, part of how we got here was by surveying a number of academic health systems, in fact, visiting them to learn how they put it in place, and now the same has happened to us. We've been visited many times as well. Okay, so that's tier 1. That's probably about 70-ish.
Just one other comment on this. This system obviously disconnects the payments that are coming to the department from the payer. So it pays the same amount for a unit of work done, whether that patient is Medi-Cal or United Healthcare. And we think that leads to a sense that we serve all patients and we serve patients equally. You are not reimbursed, the department is not reimbursed at a greater extent if for whatever reason, which we would not allow anyway, but if there was some sort of manipulation of the payer mix. This system is, to the department, payer agnostic, and I think that's important for you all over here to understand.
Yeah, excellent point. So this probably represents a little over 70%, perhaps closer to 75% of the total clinical compensation model paid to the department. The other large percent is tier 4, which is essentially a staffing model. We have a certain number of specialties where this works better than tier 1. A lot of the time it's because the physicians working here, whether it's the emergency department, hospital medicine, critical care being the big ones, they don't really control the volume of patients coming in, and we actually need physicians to staff a unit or an area like those, whether we have a lot of patients or a few patients. So we in these cases, we still use the MGMA survey, but we just use the salary portion, and we determine, all right, we need X number of shifts or X number of FTE, and then we pay the MGMA median, or if things get better, we pay higher than median at some point for the staffing of those services. Two other key parts of our program. I'm going to start with Tier 3. It's a little bit easier to explain. Tier 3 is really our quality incentive program. It's a relatively modest amount. On average, it's been about $1,500 per doctor. We have an incentive plan for all of our staff that are based on 3 large goals for the health system. There's one that's related to quality, one related to patient experience, and then one related to some sort of either growth or overall financial performance. And the physicians share those exact same goals. And then as a health system, if we do really well and we hit it out of the park, everybody will get the maximum amount. If we do a little bit less well, the payment is a little bit lower. It's actually been a very good way to align the work of our staff and our physicians around those 3 big general areas. That is the one place, I will say, where the payment actually goes to the physician. So it's the health system is actually really paying the physician in a more direct way, as opposed to just paying the department and it going through the comp plan. Okay, Tier 2, the margin share. It's been the most controversial part of our, and remains the most controversial part of our funds flow program. The idea was that if the health system were to do really, really well, shouldn't the physician share in that? And it certainly makes sense. And it was, and it was put in place at the onset. The specific formula for how this works is undergoing revision as we speak, because it's not clear that it's delivered what we wanted, which was full alignment on sort of overall financial performance of the health system. The dollars that are transferred from the health system to departments for this margin share cannot be used in any direct way for physician salaries. That's illegal, but can be used to support many of the academic programs in departments, and that's what they have typically been used for. This doesn't represent anything. If we're talking about size, where are the big dollars? The big dollars are in these 2 buckets. These are both relatively modest. Okay, other parts of the funds flow. UCSF Health also pays all the malpractice expense, all the billing expenses and fees that go with the professional fee business, any medical group expenses. In large part, this has to do with health plan credentialing and all those expenses that go with those. All of the benefits expense for clinical work. So if a faculty member, for example, is 80% clinical and 20% doing academic work, the health system would pay 80% of that, of the university's part or the employer's part of the benefits expense. And then all of the practice expenses, departmental overhead for clinical work, et cetera, that are required to run the clinical operation. And UCSF Health also provides support to the School of Medicine on an annual basis to support, certainly not all or even most, but some of the programmatic needs of the School of Medicine that I think are listed on the next slide. So I don't know, Talmadge, do you want to take this, or I'll just give it a shot? First of all, any questions before I get to this? We are literally almost done with the slides.
What's the percent for practice, the department overhead, what percent goes to the UCSF school budget?
So this is a derived number. We did our very best to actually come up with calculating the exact overhead by department and try to come up with an average. So it came out on average to be 11.8% of the net professional fee revenue in the year that we calculated it. So there's no real relationship between professional fee revenue and overhead expense, but that just happened to be the number, and it was a way for us to have an ongoing way to provide the support. The programmatic support to the School of Medicine is 4% of professional fee, equivalent to 4% of professional fee revenue.
By professional fee, do you mean just the RVU-based salaries that are provided, or the actual?
The actual revenue. So it's the revenue that the health system receives from payers. On both of those I just mentioned, this overhead and the support payment are based on revenue from plans or payers. Now, so anyway, those are the numbers. I bet there's going to be a question. Let me do this and then okay. So what does the School of Medicine programmatic support actually support? Faculty recruitments and retentions, chair and director recruitments, that high intensity teaching fund you saw earlier, support for our graduate programs, these are primarily in the basic sciences, strategic programs such as Differences Matter and our Watson Scholars program, the basic science funds flow, this is in some ways, these are somehow related, seed funding for certain program development, and the office and the running of the dean's office. So that's what's covered, or that's what those funds are used for. I think we're done. So are there questions about funds flow before we move to this? To Kelly's massive new role? Yes.
Two more questions, sir. So in the departmental expenses, are you talking about practice expenses just related to physician clinical work that you're supporting, but not necessarily research staff or other staff the department might need to support non-clinical?
So great question. So the original way we came up with the number was a dedicated attempt to try to come up with the costs within departments to support clinical work. Over time, we haven't gone back and done a recalculation, so I can't tell you for sure that every single dollar is there, or is it even enough? Are we, could we be underpaying that piece? We don't know. We know that it's about right, probably.
And then the remaining, the malpractice billing, medical group, physician benefits, what percentage of your funds flow would you say that is back to the
So let me just say, first of all, none of these go to the department. Actually, these are just paid off the top.
Okay.
So they're not expenses that are assessed.
What percent of the net revenue then would those
You know, I don't know the answer. I can tell you where we were. This was about 1%, and this is now many, many years ago. This was about 1%. This, I don't actually know. I'm sure it's quite a bit more. But I do want to make a point about the big financial picture. So if you were to say, because you can easily have the impression, and I think it would be appropriate to say, well, wait a minute, all of these things are taking away from the potential payment that should go into Tier 1 and Tier 4. So our entire faculty practice runs at a loss. And it runs at a loss even without these payments. So the reason this works is that the entire health system, so it's all the income of the entire health system is combined, and so that provides the necessary revenue. God, I keep doing that. That provides the necessary revenue to allow for these payments being made and these payments being made.
Great, thank you.
You mentioned recruitment and retention. I'm familiar with our experience here, but do you feel that you're having challenges with recruitment and retention, and if so, what are they?
Yes, we are. Not across the board and not in every area, but certainly in some areas we are having, and the challenges vary from shortage of particular specialists available, the high cost of living, the difficulty with housing. So we are definitely experiencing difficulty in certain areas. I don't know. Talent. Yeah.
So if you try to quantify it, so in the years I've been here, I would say right now it seems a little bit more difficult than it has been in previous years. I've actually recruited a large number of chairs, for example, and it's more difficult. And it's absolutely not difficult to get someone convinced to become a faculty member at UCSF. When they come with a significant other and they go visit town, that's when we have the difficulty. It's not we match up with everybody, but the community cost to live here is just so high, and that's where the difficulty.
It's probably more than we can cover tonight, but at some future date we could talk about what the university programs are that are accessible for things like home loans and how they compare to market loans and those kind of things. But we do have programs. It's hard to keep up with the rising cost of housing in the Bay Area. But.
Okay. Why don't we?
So we were going to introduce Kelly, and Mike did. So welcome on board. You all know her well. So questions. I just want to tell you. So I'm having, as I've mentioned before, a series of conversations ongoing throughout the year. The next 3 are we're doing an overview. We can have all those sessions over here as time goes on. We have them in multiple sites, so as time going on. There are ongoing sessions here. We're continuing our town halls and our meetings here on a regular basis where we'll try to touch on as many of these topics as we possibly can.
And they're online, right?
And these are all online. If you go to the UCSF School of Medicine website, they're online. So, questions?
Yeah, probably doesn't work with Josh, but probably understand that the MGMA national benchmark median data is used to inform the fund flow model that results in funding or payment from the UCSF Health to the School of Medicine, and doesn't directly inform physician compensation. Do you use the MGMA benchmarks to kind of help develop a target for physician salaries, or the X plus Y, say, or do you use other benchmarks salaries are actually kind of in line with what national benchmarks are.
Yeah,
Well,
so, go ahead.
I'll make one point, and that is when we moved, this was a big change for us, this funds flow model. And as we did that, we wanted very much for there to be at least a correlation between the payments that come via funds flow and faculty compensation, and whether it would not necessarily a dollar to dollar, but a correlation. And over the last couple of years, the comp plans have changed so that there is more of a correlation than there was. There are departments where it's actually very close, and there are others where it isn't as close. So that's a piece of the answer to your question, and I think Talmadge can address sort of what standards are used.
Yeah, so our standard has been the AAMC salary scale for academic institutions, and our goal has been the 50th percentile, and in the School of Medicine we have gone to the top 50 schools. We're a research-intensive medical school, so we've based it on the top 50 NIH-supported schools. So we look at that number, and our goal is to be at the 50th percentile or higher. So that's the number. And but we have to look at multiple things because it's confused. We look at our region. You know, you have to use multiple factors to make sure and that sort of sets the floor, and then from there.
Well, it's right on 7:30. Again, thanks for all of your questions. I realize we've shared a lot of information. The slides are all in the handout at the back. As Talmadge said, if you visit the School of Medicine website, you can see all of the, how many did you say you've done? 9? 9. So you can see, and they're not all the same. They're all on slightly different topics. So immerse yourself in the school. I know it represents a risk, but it's an exciting place to be, and we as leaders do our best to try to. Transparency, I think, is absolutely key, and we've got better and better at transparencies. Not only are all the salaries available online or in our library, but the individual dashboards, financial data, performance data, quality data. We try to drive that more and more and more granular, in some cases at the individual practice level, not to be punitive, but to allow us to collectively continue to improve the service for our patients, the financial performance of the health system, so that all boats rise. So if you're confused, that's what we expect tonight, but we hope we're starting to peel back the layers of the onion. If something that was said just doesn't make sense to you, then please reach out and we can clarify it one-on-one, because again, we've all lived it for decades, and even we get surprises sometimes about, oh, I didn't know that. So don't hesitate to ask questions. There is no question that is too stupid to ask, and hopefully if we don't have the answer, it'll drive us to get the answer, because you can rest assured you won't be the only person asking that question. You may be the only person brave enough to ask the question, and it helps us to know what is not as transparent as we believe it is. So thank you all for coming tonight.